Everybody who has worked a night shift knows the hour I'm talking about. Not midnight. Midnight's still busy. I mean the hour after 3, when the building has gone quiet in a way that buildings aren't supposed to go quiet, and the lights are still on for nobody, and you start to notice that you can hear your own clothes moving. Welcome back to Vespertine. 3 stories tonight from people who were the only one awake in a building. All 3 of them quit. Here we go. The doors were locked. I locked them myself. I turned the deadbolt with my own hand, and I watched the man walk out into the dark before I did it. And at 3:14 in the morning, the monitor showed him standing in aisle 4, inside my locked store, perfectly still, like he had been waiting there the whole time for me to look. I worked nights at a gas station for a year and a half, out on the highway where there was nothing on either side of us but fields. I took that job because I was 19 and I was taking classes in the daytime, and the night shift meant I could sit behind the counter with a textbook open and actually get paid for reading. And I want to say this before anything else, because I know how this sounds. I liked that job. It was boring. Boring was the whole point. Nothing ever happened out there, and that suited me fine. The store was busy until about 1. Truckers, people driving home from somewhere. After 1, it just stopped, like somebody turned a tap off. From 1 to 5, it was me, the coolers humming, and the radio playing to nobody. So it was a Wednesday in February, and the guy came in at 3:10. The bell over the door did its thing, and I looked up, and he was an ordinary man. That's the part I could never get anybody to understand afterwards. He was completely ordinary. Older, maybe 60, gray coat, buttoned, hair combed. He looked like somebody's grandfather on his way to church. He didn't say hello. He walked over to the coffee station, and he stood there. And he just stood. He didn't pour a cup. He didn't pick anything up. He stood in front of the coffee machine with his back to me, and he didn't move. And I went back to my book, because what else do you do? People do weird stuff at 3 in the morning. He was probably tired, or waiting for someone, or having whatever kind of night makes a man stand still in a gas station. I read 1 page, maybe 2, and when I looked up, the clock on the register said 3:14, and he was gone. Door never rang. And I want to be careful here, because I've had a lot of time to think about it. The bell was loud. It was a real mechanical bell on a metal arm. You could hear it in the back cooler. I got up and I checked the coffee station, and there was a full pot sitting there, hot, and nothing had been touched. Okay, I thought. Fine. He left. I didn't hear it. I was reading. That's a thing that can happen. But I got up and I locked the front door anyway. That was against the rules. We were 24 hours. We weren't ever supposed to lock. And I did it anyway, and I remember feeling stupid while I turned the bolt. I stood there with my hand on it, and I looked out at the forecourt, and there was nobody out there. No car, just the pumps and the fog and the light. Then I went back behind the counter, and I looked at the monitors. We had 4 little black and white screens back there, 1 for each aisle. And on the screen for aisle 4, the man was standing in my store. Same coat, hands at his sides, facing the camera. The timestamp in the corner said 3:14. I didn't scream. I want to tell you I did something, but I just sat there. And I looked at the screen, and my body did nothing at all. The only thought I actually remember having was, the doors are locked. Like that was the problem. Like the interesting part was the locking. And then I made myself stand up. And I walked around the end of the counter, and I looked down aisle 4 with my own eyes. There was nobody there. Chips and windshield fluid and the mirror at the end, and nothing else. And I turned around, and I went back, and I looked at the monitor, and the aisle was empty on the screen too, and the timestamp was moving again like normal. I called the police from behind the counter, sitting on the floor. I told the dispatcher there was a man in the store, and then I had to tell her that there wasn't a man in the store, and I listened to myself say it out loud, and I knew exactly how I sounded. They sent somebody anyway. He got there at 4:30 and he was nice about it. He walked the aisles with a flashlight and he checked the cooler and the back room, and he told me the doors were locked from the inside, which I already knew because I'm the one who locked them. He wrote it up. He asked if I wanted him to check the tapes, and I said yes, and we rewound it together, and there was nothing on the tape at all. Not the man in the aisle, not the man at the coffee machine, just me, alone, reading a book, and then suddenly standing up and staring at a screen with nothing on it. I quit the next morning. I didn't even ask for my last check for like 3 weeks. And here's the part I think about. When I went in to hand my vest back, Denise was working days. And Denise had been there 9 years. And she took the vest, and she didn't ask me why I was quitting. She just said, "Was it around 3?" And I said, "Yes." And she nodded like I'd told her the milk was expired. And she reached under the register and pulled out the shift log, this fat spiral notebook the store had kept forever, with everybody's handwriting in it going back years. And she flipped through it and showed me. 314, the regular. 314 again. 314, the man. Didn't buy anything. Different pens, different handwriting, different people, going back further than I could see. I asked her what he was. She said she didn't know, and that she'd never seen him because she'd never once worked past 2 in the morning, and she never planned to. The store's still out there. Somebody's behind that counter tonight. The call light above room 4 came on at 2 in the morning. And I want you to understand what a call light is. It doesn't come on by itself. It comes on because a person is lying in that bed and a person pushes the button. And room 4 had been empty for 8 months. I cleaned a hospital at night for 11 years, 4th floor mostly. And you have to understand that a hospital at night is not scary. That's the thing everybody gets wrong. It's the least scary place I've ever worked because there are always people. There's a nurse, there's a monitor beeping, somebody's always awake somewhere. It's the most alive building in the whole city at 3 in the morning. The 4th floor was different because half of it was closed. They'd renovated the West Wing and then the money ran out, so there was a whole corridor of finished, empty rooms with the beds stripped and the doors shut. Nobody in them. My job was to mop that corridor twice a week so it didn't get dusty. Room 4 was the 3rd door down on the left. The first time the call light came on, I honestly just thought it was broken. I was down at the far end with the bucket, and I saw the little light come on over the door, and I stood there and looked at it, and I thought, well, that's a wiring thing. Building's 100 years old. Things light up. I told Marguerite about it at the station. Marguerite was the night charge nurse, and she'd been there longer than I had, and she was the most unbothered woman I have ever met in my life. And she looked at the board, and the board showed room 4 calling, and she reached over and cleared it, and she said, "That's been doing that. That's been doing that." Like a dripping tap. It happened again the next week, and the week after that. And then it started happening on the same nights I was in that corridor, which I noticed but did not want to notice. So one night, and I don't know why I did this, I've never been able to explain it. One night, when it came on, I walked down and I opened the door. The room was empty, obviously. Bed stripped down to the plastic, blinds half open, moonlight on the floor. Nothing. And I put my hand on the mattress. It was warm. Now, I have thought about that for a long time, and I want to be fair about it. It was July. The wing had no air conditioning running because nobody was in it. A plastic mattress in a closed room in July is going to be warm. I know that. I have told myself that a lot of times, and it works fine in the daylight. But I stood in that room with my hand on that bed, and I did not feel like I was alone. And I left the bucket in the hall, and I walked out, and I didn't finish the corridor that night. The one that actually got me was about 2 weeks later. The light came on, and I didn't go. I stayed at the station with Marguerite, and I made a point of not going. and I felt very proud of myself about it. And the intercom clicked. Every room has an intercom, so a patient can talk to the desk. You push the button, and it opens the line. And the line for room 4 opened up, and it made that little hiss that an open line makes. And out of the speaker, very quietly, a voice said, "Thank you." Not a scary voice. That's the thing I can't get across to people. It was polite. It was the voice of somebody who had been waiting a long time for something and was being gracious about it. It sounded like a man in his 70s. And I looked at Marguerite, and Marguerite was looking at the speaker, and she was not unbothered anymore. And that scared me more than the voice did. In 11 years, I had never once seen that woman's face do that. She reached over and she pulled up the admissions screen and she typed in the room and she turned the monitor so I could see it. Room 4, vacant, 8 months. I asked her who was in that room 8 months ago. She said she wouldn't look that up and that I shouldn't either. And then she said the only unprofessional thing I ever heard her say in 11 years, which was, "Some of them don't get told." I asked for a transfer to a different floor the next morning. I got it. I worked another 6 years in that building, and I was fine, honestly. I liked the job. But I never went back up to 4. And when the light came on up there, whoever was on the 4th floor that night would clear it from the board, and everybody knew you cleared it and you didn't go, and nobody ever wrote that down anywhere. It was just a thing you learned. Somebody's mopping that corridor tonight. And I hope for her sake that nobody's polite to her. I watched him on the cameras for 4 months. He walked the same route every night, slow, patient, like a man doing his job. And then one night, I went down to meet him, and while I was standing in that corridor, I looked at my radio, and I realized he was on the screen upstairs, standing exactly where I had been sitting. I did overnight security in an office tower downtown for 6 years. 12 floors, a parking garage, a lobby, and about 40 cameras. And from 11 at night until 6 in the morning, the building was empty, and it was mine. That job was 95% sitting. You sit in a little room with a wall of monitors and a thermos, and every 2 hours you get up and you walk the building, and then you sit back down. That's it. That's the job. People think it's lonely, and it isn't. It's peaceful. I read more books in that room than I have in my whole life since. I first saw him on a Tuesday in the fall, about 4 months in. Camera 9, 8th floor corridor. A man walking away from the lens. Dark clothes, unhurried, hands down at his sides. He walked to the end of the corridor, and he went out of frame. And my first thought was completely boring. Somebody stayed late. It happened all the time. Lawyers, accountants, people who fell asleep at their desk. So I called it in on the radio to nobody, and I walked up to 8, and I did the whole floor with my flashlight, and there was nobody there. I checked the badge logs in the morning. Nobody had badged in. Nobody had badged out. Fine. Camera glitch. Reflection. I actually convinced myself it was a reflection for about a week. Then I saw him again. And again. And then it settled into a schedule. He came about once a week, always between 2 and 3, and he always did the same thing. He walked a corridor, slowly, away from the camera, and he went out of frame, and he was gone. Never fast, never toward the lens. He looked like a man on his own rounds. And I'm going to be honest with you about something, and I know how it sounds. I got used to him. 6 years is a long time. After a while, when he showed up on 9, I'd look up from my book, and I'd watch him walk, and I'd go back to my book. He never did anything. He walked. That's all he ever did. Some nights, I'd catch myself thinking, oh, there he is, like a coworker. I never told anybody. Who would I tell? I'd have to say the sentence out loud, and the second I said it out loud, I'd be a guy who sees things, and I liked that job. The night it stopped being fine was in March. He came up on the 6th floor, which was new. He'd never done 6. And I don't know what was different about that night, but I decided I was going to go down and meet him. I actually stood up and said, "Okay," out loud to an empty room. I took the stairs down 2 floors, and I came out on 6, and I stood in that corridor with my flashlight, and it was empty, and I felt like an idiot. And I keyed my radio to say something to nobody. And that's when I looked at my radio, and the little screen on it was doing that thing where it mirrors the control room feed. And on it, I could see my control room, my chair, my thermos, and him, standing in the middle of my control room, facing the monitors, exactly where I'd been sitting 90 seconds earlier. I ran back up. I want to be clear that I did not think anything on the way. I just went up the stairs. And the room was empty. My book was open where I left it. My chair was where I left it. And every single monitor on that wall, 12 floors, the garage, the lobby, the stairwells, every screen had him standing in it, not walking, standing, in 40 different empty rooms at the same time, all facing the camera, all perfectly still. I left the building. I didn't clock out, and I didn't take my thermos. And I set the door alarm off going through the lobby, and I stood out on the sidewalk in March with no coat on. And I looked up, and there was one window lit, high up, on a floor where I had turned everything off myself. I didn't go back. They mailed me my last check, but I thought about it for a long time, and here's where I've landed, and I know it's not satisfying. I don't think he ever wanted anything from me. In 6 years, he never came toward the camera. He never came toward me. He was doing his rounds and I was doing mine, and for 6 years we did them in the same building. And I think the only thing that changed that night in March was that I went looking for him. Somebody's in that chair tonight. And if he's smart, he stays in it. That's 3. If you've worked nights, you already know the hour I'm talking about. And you probably know that the trick isn't staying awake. The trick is not getting up to look. If you have one of these, put it in the comments. I read all of them. And if you're on shift right now, don't go check. Sleep well, if you can.